Hi, everyone. Before we get to the episode, we want to take a moment to address the June 24th, 2022 Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. This decision stripped away the right to have a safe and legal abortion.
Everyone should have the freedom to decide what's best for themselves and their families, including when it comes to ending a pregnancy. This decision has dire consequences for individual health and safety and could have harsh repercussions for other landmark decisions.
Restricting access to comprehensive reproductive care, including abortion, threatens the health and independence of all Americans.
Learn more by visiting choice.crd.co. That's choice.crd.co. If you're able to support others, please consider donating to abortion funds.
We encourage you to speak up, take care, and spread the word. 1999 The Podcast is a production of the CageClub Podcast Network. For more podcasts on movies, comics, and all things pop culture, head to cageclub.me. To contact us with questions, comments, or just to say hi, send us an email at 1999@cageclub.me. You can find me on Twitter at probablyrealjb and Joey at soulpopped. And you can follow the show on Twitter at 1999 The Podcast. To support the show, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. The show is written, produced, and edited by us. Welcome to 1999, the podcast. I am John Brooks.
And I'm Joey Lewandowski.
And we are officially across the halfway point of our first group of 9 movies. This is episode 6. Wow. Today's movie stars Annette Bening, Thora Birch, Mina Suvari, Wes Bentley, Chris Cooper, Allison Janney, Peter Gallagher, Scott Bakula, and the guy from K-Pax. It is written by Alan Ball and is the feature directorial debut of Sam Mendes. Today's movie is American Beauty.
I don't want to nitpick your math, but wasn't 5? I guess 5 was the halfway point. So I guess we never mind. I'm not going to nitpick your math. Anyway,
halfway through episode 5, we were halfway through the first.
What was episode 5? 6 Sense?
That was 6 Sense.
Wow, that should have been our 6th movie.
Should have been, but things don't work out that way.
But this is a big one, though. This is the wins every award, basically. The reason that we can get angry at this movie for every other thing that we watch, like, this was great. Why didn't this win awards? Oh, right, because American Beauty existed. This is a big one.
It is a very big one. And it won a bunch of awards. The reason that it's really on this list, I think, is because of the cultural sort of impact at the time, and also the re-examination of this movie that has occurred over the last couple decades, which has been really quite a shift in the way it's perceived. But before we get too far into that, would you like to give a brief plot synopsis?
Oh boy.
What is American Beauty about, Joey?
I don't know if it could be brief. It's about a family led by the guy from K-Pax, and he's having a midlife crisis, and his wife is kind of having a midlife crisis because of him, and his daughter's kind of having a quarter-life crisis because of him, and just because she's a teenager in high school, and it's everyone kind of finding their way through life as he falls in love with an underage girl and starts forming a relationship with the young boy next door who sells him drugs. And it's, I guess an examination of small town suburban America and how no one's ever happy until they are, maybe. I don't know. Is that fair? I don't know if that's good or not.
Sure.
There's a lot that goes on, but it's also kind of just like all the same sort of analysis of mundanity in a way.
And I think one of the things that makes it so sort of open to criticism now over the course of its kind of aging is that it's not ever entirely clear what it's supposed to be about, which can sometimes be fine. I think that multiple interpretations to a movie is a good thing, and that you don't necessarily have to have a thesis that is entirely clear every time you make a movie. But in this case, it's a movie that kind of presents itself as though it does have a thesis, and though it you're supposed to know what it's talking about. And I think when you then land on the thing that is most correct into what it's talking about, then you got to start asking yourself some questions as to what exactly it's saying and how it's saying it, which I guess would be the best way I could sort of articulate why people have given second thoughts to it now.
Sure. That makes sense.
It's also about a floating plastic bag, whatever. The color red.
That's 2 movies in a row about the color red.
Yeah, weird. I was thinking about that as well. Color red's great.
It's truly one of the best colors.
Anyway, let's talk about its critical success. As you say, it won all the Oscars, which is to say that it was the movie. There's usually one that wins more than any other. It was nominated for a ton. It won a whole bunch of them. Uh, the same's true for the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, a bunch of Critics Circles Awards, the SAG Awards, all of those. American Beauty was the behemoth of that year. It still has an 84% Metacritic score. It gets Metacritic's must-see designation, so I think we'll pick at that nit a little bit as we go along in the episode. And it has an 87% score on Rotten Tomatoes with a 93% audience score. So people still seem to like this movie, which is interesting. And if you go to the main page for American Beauty on Rotten Tomatoes, you see a lot of reviews that are just still absolutely kind of tripping over themselves to praise this movie.
Like, new reviews?
Some of them are new, some of them are from the time. So some of them are sort of second look reviews, but a lot of them are archived from the time. And so certainly at the time, critics were trying to come up with new words to describe just how wonderful American Beauty is. One such critic is not listed on Rotten Tomatoes, but is on the show today. So we'll get to that later on. But here's a couple of samplings. Paul Clinton from CNN says American Beauty is deeply disturbing, acerbically funny, brilliantly acted, and breathtakingly original and highly sophisticated. Anne Hornaday from the Baltimore Sun says a tightly coiled rage seethes beneath the pretty surface of American Beauty, a wickedly funny black comedy directed by newcomer Sam Mendes. Rex Reed in The Observer, Kevin Spacey gives the performance of his life. That may be a fair thing to say, but again, weird. Jimmy Bernard, New York Daily News, American Beauty approaches a manic, almost cartoonish edge without falling over. Both Spacey and Benning use extraordinary comic timing to bring these very sad, lost characters to life. Blah, 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 blah. But I have some good news here, which is that it is time for the redemption in 1999, the podcast of David Edelstein, who I have called out a couple of times already on the show for being egregiously wrong about some of the movies, including Eyes Wide Shut, that he covered at the time. But Edelstein gave American Beauty a bad review in 1999. And his pull quote on Rotten Tomatoes says, quote, "The hairpin turns from farce to melodrama, from satire to bathos are fresh and deftly navigated, but almost every one of the underlying attitudes is smug and easy." So he was not kind.
Smug is a good word for this movie. I don't know if we use that enough, but I feel like that's a very apt descriptor of the tone, which I guess, might be masked by, oh my God, this is so artsy. But yeah, smug, I like that word a lot for this. Maybe that's the pull quote. It's just, the episode word. It's not a movie or not a word from the movie. It's just smug.
Yeah, and it is smug. And again, I don't think that being smug makes a movie bad necessarily. This is one of those movies that very, very soon into its life became clear that it was very kind of proud of itself. And I think that turns a lot of people off pretty quickly. You can see a movie, but there is, and you can think it's really great, but there is that kind of underlying, almost condescending smugness to it that I think is a fair criticism of this movie. And I don't think the personalities of its two primary creators in Alan Ball and Sam Mendes really helps dissuade people from that argument. Say what you want about those two, but I don't think either one of them are necessarily what you would consider to be like humble about their work. And that sort of seems to rub off here. So anyway, American Beauty is, of the movies that we are covering in this podcast, certainly unique in that I don't think either of us necessarily would have wanted to or would necessarily have put it in the first round, if not for the fact that the year itself demands that we talk about this movie.
Yeah, I don't think you can do the type of project we're doing and not put the Best Picture winner or the movie with the most Academy Award nominations from that year or the most Academy Award wins from that year in the first batch of like, these are the important movies. Like, it's not one that we like necessarily,
Yeah.
but I think in terms of analyzing this year in film, it'd be weird if we didn't. Like, it'd be kind of, I guess, understandable, but it would be weird if we didn't. I am looking at the 72nd Academy Awards, which was the award show that encapsulated this year of film. And American Beauty went 5 of 8, which I think we'll probably talk about in the episode. But The Matrix went 4 of 4, which is very exciting. And then only The Cider House Rules in a movie that I do not know and I probably have not heard of, other than like maybe in the planning of the show, Topsy Turvy, are the only movies that won more than one. They both won 2.
Oh, Topsy Turvy is great. I forgot that was 99 as well. Now I'm very excited to talk about Topsy
Oh, it's a
Turvy.
Mike Leigh movie. Okay, yes, he's a very big blind spot for me, so I'm looking forward to rectifying that with this podcast.
It's a long way off till we talk about that one, but that's about Gilbert and Sullivan, and it's so great. Anyway, off topic. What were the 4 that The Matrix won?
Let's see.
Editing, sound editing,
The
visual
Matrix,
effects.
best film editing, best sound, best sound effects editing, best visual effects. So they were all these sort of like, I don't want to besmirch they're all below the line nominations or awards. It's like, hey, Fury Road was the best movie that came out this year, but like, we can't give this best picture. So we're just gonna give it like 13 technical. It didn't win 13, but we're gonna give it like 7 technical awards. It's like, we love it, but we don't really love it because we're still stuffy. We're smug.
Anyway, let's talk about our guest today. Who do we have on the show?
Our guests today, we have 2 of them. They are the co-hosts of the Contenders podcast right here on the CageClub podcast network, Tobin and Aislinn Addington.
And they are siblings.
They are siblings.
One last note before we start. My audio this week, not as good as it normally is.
Well, your audio right now is good. Your audio next is not.
My audio, the next audio you will hear.
I don't want you to gaslight people, be like, wait, his audio's not good? He sounds exactly the same as he always does.
He does. I will sound a bit different in the episode because I happened to be recording this episode when we were on vacation, and I was sitting inside of a fitness room in a hotel in the Hudson Valley. So that's why that sounds like that. But okay, we're going to cut to our discussion of American Beauty, and we will be right back. Welcome, Addingtons. And Tobin, we apologize for giving you 1999 The Podcast Presents COVID, which is a thing that happens on this show for some reason.
Every single time.
Every time.
Almost literally more episodes than not.
Well, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, COVID has been bad to our guests. So
Oh, man.
Luckily, you got it before. Well, I don't know. You kind of got it around the time we were going to record the first time, but so maybe that's maybe that's why. But how are you feeling? Are you well?
I'm as well as can be expected, and I'm hanging in there, and I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. I might sound a bit different from normal episodes because I am recording in a fitness center at a Hampton Inn in the Hudson Valley for reasons.
Like, I don't want there to be someone to come in there, but I also really want someone to come in there.
I don't think they're going to. It is 9:00 at night. And
wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Timely topical joke. Is your fitness center Kevin Spacey's garage?
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
No, but it does look quite a bit like the sort of thing that you might expect from that set. So yeah, it's all part of fitting into the general motif of the episode, I guess. No, we are taking the kids to Legoland on Wednesday and Thursday, and so we're spending a few days in New York, in the Hudson Valley, and that's where I am right now recording this episode. So a little unorthodox, but that's okay. This is a unorthodox movie that I feel different ways about. So anyway, we have Tobin and Aislinn both here. Aislinn, how are you? You do not have COVID, is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, I do not have COVID, but I have a stack of home tests. And I, now that I understand that this podcast sometimes gives people COVID, I will be prepared to test tomorrow.
Well, the good news is that we've never given people COVID after the fact. It's always before
Oh, gotcha.
they
Okay.
come on the podcast. Usually in the
Yeah, it's not contagious. It's preemptive.
yeah.
It's a rite of passage. I mean, it's also a global pandemic, so I think
That's
you know,
true.
as
I guess
important
that's-
as this podcast is, I do think there are other factors at play.
That's a fair point. Yeah. Anyways, I'm glad you guys are alive and possibly don't have COVID. 50% of you.
Yeah.
That's good. You two are also on the CageClub podcast network. Aislinn, I know you do a lot of work with High School Slumber Party with our friend Brian Rodriguez. And you two occasionally host a show called The Contenders. Would you guys like to explain what that's all about?
Sure, absolutely. So, yes, we are the co-hosts of The Contenders on the wonderful Cage Club Podcast Network, where we talk through movies made by and starring women who refuse to play by the rules. It's a podcast about female filmmakers and female characters, and sometimes the larger film industry, and taking a critical look at most often times that women get to do awesome things in film. Not always. There's been a couple of stinkers in there, and they're all my fault. But you'll have to go through the catalog to find them. They're all listed right there at cageclub.me.
And Tobin, you're in the biz, right? You're a big time Hollywood screenwriter these days.
Big time. Yes. Yes, I do. I write some movies and some TV.
I just realized that I have your movie, your newest movie, on my DVR, and I was like, I don't remember what this is because it's been on there and I haven't gotten rid of it. I haven't watched it yet, but I've had it on there since December, and so now that I remember what it is, I'm gonna watch it.
Just
There
in
you
time
go.
for Christmas in July.
There you go. Exactly.
And the name of that film is
A Christmas Stray.
Ooh.
excellent. One can find on the Discovery Plus app, which I have kept since December because of some of the fantastic offerings, such as Love After Lockup and Seeking Sister Wives.
I do think it's about to get folded into HBO Max, so Tobin, your movie might become a part of an
Ooh.
even bigger audience base.
Yeah, and it very first aired on the Oprah Winfrey Network. So it's between Oprah, Discovery, and HBO. That's not bad. That's not
It's
bad.
a nice rock and a hard place.
Is this kind of one of those like Lifetime Christmas movies?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome.
Mhm.
Exciting. Is Melissa Joan Hart in it?
No, but could have been. Yes,
Right.
That-
She was on
that
the
is-
short list.
That is the genre in which we are working. Yes.
Gotcha. That's exciting. Today's movie was written by a guy who also did some television and film. So we will get into that momentarily. But we are here to talk about a movie that has some women doing some stuff in it. Certainly not playing by the rules sometimes. Occasionally. It's got your Allison Janney's and your
Annette Bening?
Tora Birches and your Annette Bennings. Yeah, really good cast. Really interesting movie. I have a lot to say. I'm sure you guys do too. But let's start from the top. We'll find out what year Joey saw this on DVD. But Tobin, I know we're sort of closer in age. I would assume this one goes all the way back to 1999 for you. I may be wrong, but both of you guys tell us the first time that you saw American Beauty and what your initial reaction to it was.
Well, I'll get the embarrassment out of the way first to say that I did see this movie in the theater on opening weekend in 1999 because I was reviewing movies for my college newspaper at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And as I found the review that I wrote for American Beauty.
I love it.
Which is one of the only times that my English and film professor stopped me after the review and said, "What were you thinking?"
Wow.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
This could go any number of directions.
Yeah.
Do you have it in front of you right now, Tobin?
I do. I do
Okay.
have it in front of
Okay.
me.
You
Yeah.
are going to read some excerpts from this, I assume, because
I'm going to read just the last couple of lines because it kind of sums up what this review. So if you'll indulge me for a moment,
I'm ready.
It ends with this. There is nothing more for me to say. You must see this film. American Beauty will challenge us to look at the beauty, the tragic, comic, serene, violent, ugly, gorgeous, piercing beauty that is each moment of life. When we learn to do this, we will be living, truly living, moment by moment in the present. One movie can't do it all for us, but it is a place to start. Next week, I'll go back to using all those meaningless adjectives that critics use to color around the edges of a film. Until then, I leave you with only one word about American Beauty. Go. Now,
I want to congratulate you on your bravery for reading that to us. That took a lot of courage.
I'm so red in the face. Yes.
The behind the scenes of it all is that I know the grade, the rating that Tobin gave it on Letterboxd today. So
yes, that's right.
I want a podcast with college Tobin and today Tobin because that would be a good discussion, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, college John and today John also have similar, I think, binary opinions about this. But all right, so you saw it opening weekend. You clearly thought it was a something to write that for.
Yep.
When it came out, and that was your initial reaction. Aislinn, what about you?
Well, while I do not have the professional prose to add, I do have a couple of, I think, details that could similarly place this. So I could not drive when this came out, but I had to be dropped off at the theater. And I assume it's rated R, yeah?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I don't know, Missoula, Montana did not card, I guess. Or my mom bought us tickets and then left, but I got picked up. I was there with a couple of friends, and one friend in particular who had already seen it once and saw it in the theater many, many times. And so I was kind of hyped for it that way, but got picked up, got in the car. My mom said, "How was it?" And I burst into tears.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tears?
At the time, I mean, again, I just very, very contrasting of my viewing experience yesterday. But at the time, I thought it was a peek behind the curtain at like grown-ups. And
interesting.
And I was so I felt so, empathetic toward these grown-ups that were so unhappy and felt so trapped. This is my recollection of why I burst into tears. But it was impactful, let's say, that night. And then fast forward to, it was near the Oscars that my friend who I'd gone to the movie with, it was her birthday. And I had a Baskin-Robbins ice cream cake made in the image of the poster. So like woman's torso, belly button, and red roses.
Wow.
A custom ice cream cake for her birthday of the poster of this film. So I just, I guess whimsy has always been part of my appreciation love language. But yeah, this was it for a minute. And I do the part that was most unsettling to me yesterday was how much of the dialogue I remembered. I must have watched this a few times.
Yeah.
Because there were whole passages that I could just recite.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had the same kind of reaction, actually. Joey, what year did you finally see this? And like, where were where was this movie in its pendulum swing by the time that you saw it? Because it's
I
been
don't
through
know
a
the answer to that question.
Okay.
I thought for a second, because a peek behind the curtain here is that Tobin was one of my professors my sophomore year of college. So I was like, maybe I saw this movie under his tutelage,
Mm.
not like in his class, but while I was taking his class. I saw it the year before. So Tobin Aislinn, I don't know if you've listened to the podcast yet, but basically I have seen every movie that I've seen for this show, I've seen in the first 2 years of college, which is when I saw like most movies.
I see.
So the story is the same every single week. It's very boring. There's nothing exciting there. But this was, so I have, before I used Letterboxd, I just got the list in Excel, which I've mentioned before. And this is one of the first like 30 movies that I logged in there. So this must have been September, October of my freshman year. So it must have been like, okay, let me go back to recent Best Picture winners and watch those.
Right.
And I have no idea what I thought of it, but I guess I liked it enough to have bought it on Blu-ray eventually because I own it. But I've only seen it the once before, and then I watched it again today.
So you liked it.
I guess, but I also buy a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Like that's not really, truly that much of a recommendation.
Right, because you go to rent and it's $2.99 or $3.99.
No, I
But
buy
you can
the
buy
the,
it for
the
$5.
physical thing.
Right.
No, the physical.
Oh, the actual, like, it got mailed to your home and now it's on a shelf?
Yes, like I have the Blu-ray in the other room.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
you tend to buy movies that you feel are not necessarily that they're, it's like that you feel like are important, right? That like belong in the, whether or not they're great or good or like.
Well, I used to, yes, for sure. Now I basically buy movies that I love. Like
Right.
I've scaled back in
Right.
terms of that. But for the most part, yes, absolutely. I would just buy like, oh, this is cinema or whatever.
Right,
Like I want to
right.
have this on my shelf. This says something about
Totally.
it or whatever,
Totally,
right?
totally.
Yeah, and however we're gonna fall in this movie, I think by the end of this podcast, I don't think any of us would disagree that it is at least a cinematic something.
I might disagree with that. I might.
It's not a like poorly slapped together movie that we
Right.
have since forgotten about. Yeah, so Tobin, I guess I was a sophomore in college when this came out, probably around the same time as you.
Yeah.
I was not writing for my college newspaper and doing reviews, but if I was, and I had to have done a review quickly after seeing it the first time, probably a pretty similar bunch of nonsense. I would have gibberished out onto paper and been like, "This is a genius review," and then cringed about it 20-something years later. Yeah, I look, the first time I saw this, obviously I was very swept up in it and moved by it. And there's a lot of, I think we'll talk about this later, but a lot of reasons why that's the feeling it gives. I will say though, that by the time that like between when this came out in like the late fall and when award seasons happened in early spring, I had already swung on that pendulum. I was already into like anti-American beauty mode by the time the Oscars had arrived and it was getting all of the awards. I think that's probably true for quite a number of people. But like this movie's also been through a number of different pendulum swings, I think. But yeah, it's that initial like kind of obsessed with it for like a month. And then kind of being like, maybe there's other movies of this year about which we're devoting an entire podcast that are better or more noteworthy or longer lasting than this one is.
Well, it's really important for our show. Like this is like, in terms of what we're doing here, this is the movie that's going to keep coming up when I'm like, what won Best Picture that year? Because I don't remember the premise of the podcast. Yeah. And the answer is always this movie.
But it's also the one that's so weird about it is that it's so of that year, it's so of that time that it just doesn't like, it only works within the context of that time. Whereas like all these other movies that we've been discussing are so sort of timeless and so like groundbreaking and, like Blair Witch and Sixth Sense, and like that's what we've been talking about. And this one really is an anomaly in a really sort of strange way.
Yeah, I will say that this is the 6th episode we're doing for the show. I think that this is the first movie that if you have not seen it yet and you're wondering, I think you can skip this one. I don't think that I think the only reason to watch this for the first time in 2022 is if you're watching all the Best Picture winners or awards movies or whatever. I don't think that there's anything that this movie does. Like, I kind of hated this movie in a lot of different ways. And I think it's, other than some good performances, I don't think there's much redeeming about this movie. But I think there's nothing this movie does that it warrants watching now. Like, there's nothing about it that is like, oh my God, I don't think maybe I could be swayed in a way, but I don't think there's anything in here that requires any of that.
I think that the reasons for seeing this movie now are more anthropological than they are as you say, in talking about 1999, which is a seminal year of the latter half of the half of movies, at least American movies. It's one you have to contend with. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason to watch it. I think if you're going to watch it, I don't know that. It's certainly not a movie I'm ever going to watch again, except for that reason, which is, of course, the reason I watched it, for this.
Right. It's an interesting, interesting is this stupid word. The other thing that it really reminded me of this watching was something that came out years later, but I want to say, I'm going to guess 2007, when making stuff for YouTube kind of became a thing. And it was one of those 5-minute fake trailers of here are all the things you need for an Academy Award winning movie. And it used the same kind of music, and I don't know, it just very much felt like chum in the water Oscar bait as we know it now. I mean, it's, yes, some things are different, but I don't know. I think I agree with Tobin that the reasons are anthropological, and also, as you already mentioned, I would watch the scenes with Allison Janney and the scenes with Annette Bening because they are outstanding, and even just in a clip, you know what I mean? Even if you took them out and were just look at Allison Janney pre-West Wing in this really, really bizarre and stylized but also subtle role. So long story short, I agree with Tobin. I guess that's what happens when we go on other people's podcasts. Just kidding. We agree a lot.
I do want to set the scene in terms of what we're talking about in terms of the awards, the impact of this. So this won 5 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Lead Actor for Kevin Spacey, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography, and it was nominated for but did not win Best Leading Actress for Annette Bening, the aforementioned Annette Bening, ding, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Score. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of awards.
Yeah. So a lot of, I think, the initial kind of backlash was the sort of weird infighting happening between Miramax and DreamWorks around awards season. And to give some context for why that was going on. Famously in the 1998 cycle, Miramax, under the guidance of a guy named Harvey Weinstein, I'm not sure what he's up to lately, but anyway, so this guy Weinstein invests a ton of money in a ad campaign to get Shakespeare in Love, speaking of movies nobody cares about anymore, Shakespeare in Love, the Best Picture Oscar. Now its main contender, of course, was Saving Private Ryan, which was DreamWorks film, right? And most people to this day are let's just pretend that won Best Picture because clearly
not me.
Yes, I second.
Okay, fine.
What is that, 1998, the podcast?
Yeah. Anyway, despite your wrong opinion about Shakespeare in Love, the following year DreamWorks got revenge, and they went heavy in on sort of a blitz campaign to get American Beauty the Oscar sort of as a makeup call for what they felt was a slight with Saving Private Ryan in '98. And so there was already a lot of like really kind of gross feeling that people had about sort of what was going on there, that I think put a lot of people off of the movie initially. And I think that probably also led to a lot of people kind of reevaluating what their initial reaction to the movie was. And then 9/11 happened. And I think that's sort of like the trajectory of where this movie goes. And then, of course, like Kevin Spacey happened, right? Some decade and a half or so after the fact. So there's a lot going on that sort of like led to, I think, a lot of people revising how they initially felt when they saw the movie, which has a lot going for it from a very sort of some of its parts kind of perspective.
Well, the weird thing, I'm looking now again at the awards, because if that's what we're talking about now, and for a year good enough to sustain this entire podcast and the book that we talked about in our first episode with Brian Raftery, the nominees for Best Picture that year are not great.
Yeah.
Like it's Cider House Rules, which I know you like, but I do not like.
Mm-hmm.
The Insider, which I have not seen. The Green Mile, which is good, but like, you know,
it's fine.
Surrounding.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Yes,
yeah.
It's not bad, but it's not in Best Picture. And then The Sixth Sense, which is again good, but again, we've done more than one movie for this podcast already that's not on that list that's better than all those movies.
Oh, and Magnolia is also right. It's better than those movies and longer lasting. Sure.
So it's just wild that, you know, because I was listening to a podcast recently because now that Elvis is about to come out in theaters or has just come out as this episode drops, there's a big, long profile in the New York Times with Tom Hanks. And again, they talk about Forrest Gump winning Best Picture over Pulp Fiction. And it just feels like the 90s got it wrong every year or most years or a lot of years or something in a way that probably still happens, but feels maybe with the benefit of hindsight, even more egregious than now.
It's almost like the system is flawed and the award is not reflective of excellence in the way that we want it to be.
Yeah, and to echo John's point, the 90s was the height of excess in campaigning, not just by Miramax and by studios large and small, often pioneered by Miramax, where there were no rules about what they could send people, Academy members, to like get their votes. So the lavishing of gifts on people to get them to vote, gifts is too strong a word, but the goodie bags and all the swag, all the stuff, it's not quite to like Golden Globe levels, but pretty close. So the 90s in particular is a time where you're spent doing more tracking of campaigning than you are of the quality of the movie necessarily. When you get closer to today, as they've changed some of those rules, and it expanded the type and like the kind of voters that they have in the Academy, it begins to you get a Parasite now in a way that you wouldn't. Which is not to say Parasite wasn't campaigned, but you could track the campaigning in Entertainment Weekly to figure out who's going to win the Oscar more than like which movie was better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So we're going to get to, I think all of us have a different opinion today. Tobin, I want to know about how like you became the man you are today, and would fight with that person who wrote that review.
Tobin, the podcast.
It sounds like, but let's talk about some of the things, first of all, that are unambiguously really, really good about this movie. And I think there's a few things that sort of, that are so good that sometimes it tricks people into thinking the movie is better than it actually is, right? So we can start with like Conrad Hall shot this movie, and the cinematography in this movie is absolutely spectacular, right? It's kind of like worth watching just to like see it visually.
Well, what's weird about that is that it like spends so much of the time on Wes Bentley's camcorder that it makes the rest of the movie look even better by comparison, because it's like, this looks like shit, like by intentionally, I know that, but like so much of the movie, like maybe like 15 minutes or whatever, looks bad on purpose. Right. So by comparison, the rest looks even better. It looks great already, but like it looks even better.
I mean, Conrad Hall's a as a master cinematographer.
Yeah.
This was a great year, though, looking at the nominees. Roger Pratt cinematographer for The End of the Affair, which is one of my favorite movies from the year, is gorgeous. Sleepy Hollow, Emmanuel Lubezki, who started winning Oscars then, much closer to today, shot Sleepy Hollow, which is a beautiful movie. Snow Falling on Cedars, Robert Richardson is another. These are all like heavy hitter cinematographers.
Yeah.
And so, I would easily put, Conrad Hall in. I mean, I would not be offended if any of the other movies won as well. But there's nothing. I mean, you can't ding this movie for its cinematography.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. Obviously there's a lot of talent in how to get it to look how it did, and I think I don't know how much you talk about sort of like it holding up, but like I guess the thing I had forgotten was like the surrealism
Yeah.
in all
Yeah.
the rose petals. And that's the least of my issues with those scenes. But it wasn't just it wasn't distracting in like this is an old movie, I mean it was pretty seamless even with kind of those extra bits. It looks good. It just is full of bullshit.
It is full of bullshit. The other thing that I think just still endures for me is Thomas Newman's score, which is one of the things that makes the plastic bag work. It makes a lot of the movie work, actually, and it's actually a much more well thought out and sophisticated score than even it seems like. Like, I've read a lot of critique of the movie that just focuses on the way that the score operates within certain scenes. Thomas Newman was in the midst of the best few years of his life. I mean, this is one of those scores that is like in a string of just incredible work for him. He'd recently done like Shawshank Redemption and Little Women, which is a great score, and like How to Make an American Quilt. Like he's incredible work. And this really was like a very strange departure for him as well, because he's so much more used to writing in that sort of like Americana style. And this is a very like minimalist and strange and experimental kind of a score. But it works perfectly with the movie. It works perfectly against the cinematography. And it's one of those things as well that sort of makes the movie seem like it's better than it actually is. And I also I think movies should be seen for all of their parts combined. So I guess saying that's kind of ridiculous anyway. But like, it does. Like, it's one of the seductive things about the movie that really gives it a lot of its emotional weight. And that still, to me, even watching it now, still endures.
And its tonal balance. This is a movie of what should be conflicting and contrasting tones, and again, maybe might be a better movie, or more true in some way. But the score does such a nice job of kind of managing the tones for the movie in a way. One quick Thomas Newman story. In grad school, I was making movies and had a composer whose name was Thomas M. Newman. And so for a while on IMDb, the IMDb recorrected the name. So it looked like Thomas Newman, who did the scores for my movies, which I always thought was my short films, which I thought was kind of cool. Anyway, that's my other Thomas Newman story.
Well, there's a lot of Newmans in the movie music Newman clan. So, of course, his cousin or his uncle or cousin is Randy Newman. One of the two. His grandfather wrote the 20th Century Fox theme.
Yep.
His brother David Newman's also a composer for film. So like, yeah, who knows? He could be part of the Newman clan. Like,
he wasn't.
That
It turns out he wasn't. But
but you could just say he's like a third cousin once removed.
Right.
It's like they're like the Barrymores of
film
music.
composing. Yeah.
And his father was Alfred E. Newman, the face of Mad Magazine.
Correct. That's 100% true trivia. No notes. Anyways, so those are the good things. And also, I mean, the cast, it's Chris Cooper's in this fucking movie. Anytime Chris Cooper's in a movie, like it elevates it. I loved Wes Bentley. He was one of those performances that even when I soured on the movie, I still loved him and his performance. There's not a bad performance in this, but of course, like, the big sort of elephant in the room remains Kevin Spacey. And especially in light of what we now know about Kevin Spacey, and to what he was alluding when he made that very creepy Oscar acceptance speech, which is all just like fucked up and taints this movie pretty badly.
This is the highlight of my day. I hope it is not all downhill from here. To my friends, for pointing out my worst qualities. I know you do it because you love me. And that's why I love playing Lester. Because we got to see all of his worst qualities, and we still grew to love him. And this movie to me is all about how any single act from any single person put out of context is damnable. But the joy of this movie is that it is real beauty.
I understand that, you know, the Kevin Spacey of it all has made the most headlines. I want to also note the tragedy of now us having a better understanding of Mina Suvari's experience and experiences in the industry that, you know, are mirror and, you know, some of the things that her character is meant to be flippant about. And I don't know, that was also a difficult aspect of this rewatch of understanding that she was in the midst of multiple abusive relationships and had been taken advantage of and would continue to be taken advantage of in a number of ways, and in battling addictions, etc. At this time that, again, soured the milk, if you will.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, also this was like two very big movies, both with American in the title for
Yes.
Mina Suvari, right, of that year as well. And yeah, you think of like her star being as high as it was ever going to be this year, and you're right, it also is a very sort of, in retrospect, knowing what we know now, tragic element to all of this as well. It is hard to watch it without that whole cloud kind of cast over the entire movie. Let's talk about Sam Mendes for a second, who is someone who I just don't get in terms of what the big deal is. So there's two things about this movie that I think are important to note. One is that you have a screenwriter who's coming from basically only doing television and writing a screenplay for the first time. The television that he was doing, speaking of like women in sort of film / television, right? He wrote for Grace Under Fire, and he wrote for Sybil. So two very, like, you know, female-led comedies that were critically well received in the 1990s. And then made this movie partly because he saw, like, speaking of the 9/11-ness of this all, like a paper plastic bag floating around the World Trade Center towers one afternoon, and like that's part of the inspiration for this movie. So that's sort of weird and creepy. But then Sam Mendes, who was a stage director, who had a couple of successes on stage, they were like, "Yeah, direct this movie." Now he was at the very end of a long list of directors who said no. And he was like, "Sure, I'll do it." And I don't even know how they got to him, to be honest. But I'll be honest, like, I don't like Sam Mendes as a director. I don't think he's a good film director. I have no idea who saw this movie and was like, this guy should make a Bond picture.
Well, he made the best Bond, so that's all I know.
He did not?
Yeah,
okay,
he did. He did.
Okay,
Yeah, he
sure.
did. Yeah.
We'll have that conversation some other
time. And it's
time.
called Spectre. Just kidding.
I like Spectre. I don't hate Spectre.
I'm just kidding.
I hated Skyfall so much, but we can have that conversation later.
People do. You're wrong, but people do.
Well,
it's wrong. John, I just want you to know that it's so rare for Tobin and I to agree on an action movie. And I don't know, like, I wouldn't necessarily call Skyfall like an action movie, but it's not.
Yeah.
So let us have this moment.
All right, let's talk about Sam Mendes then. You know how I feel. What who is more to blame for this movie being bad? Is it Sam Mendes or Alan Ball?
Alan Ball.
Why?
Because all of these we've already praised the a few of the sort of technical elements of the movie, and you've very nicely put it that the technical elements, the way it looks, the way it sounds, the performances that people are giving, all of these sort of aesthetic choices are filtered through the director, like it or not. And the issues that I have with the movie are almost entirely outside of like the Kevin Spacey stuff are almost entirely the focus of the story and the script. And I feel like it's the writing in the movie that rings so completely hollow, that is salvaged to the degree that it is by how sort of gorgeously made it is. You can have all those elements work and the director not be good. I'm not rendering judgment on Sam Mendes. I think I like him more than you do, although I think I want to like him more than I do, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the so if this movie, here's my pitch for this movie. If you were to remake this movie, then you recenter the entire movie on Annette Bening's character, because the way the big central problem of this movie is that the movie is presenting Lester as a hero, and what Lester's doing is, yes, he's finding himself and reinventing his life, but in order to fuck a high school kid. And then he's a hero because he chooses not to.
Mm.
And then he gets martyred. And it's like, oh, all of these things are terrible. If this movie was about, and the movie has such contempt for the Annette Bening character, I think. And I think that if the movie was about this woman who had done everything she'd been told all her life, like, what do I have to do? Right? I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and realizing that it's not enough and it's terrible and her life is hollow, and like, and center her experience as a person going through all these things, I feel like it would be a much better movie. And that's an issue of storytelling perspective and not directing, I think.
Aislinn, does this movie hate women?
Yes. I mean, it certainly does not value women.
Yeah.
And it certainly does not care to understand women, right? These, like Tobin just said, Annette Bening is there to be shrill and sarcastic, and another, piece of Lester's disappointment, either that she's disappointed in him or she's disappointed in her life. And I don't know, it's sort of a caricature that way. I had forgotten I'd forgotten a few things. I'd forgotten the level of abuse we see in Wes Bentley's household.
Yeah.
And then that in 2022 eyes, and with the understanding I have of sometimes how these things work, like, if that's how much we see as the audience, whether it's from Thor Birch's perspective or what have you, like, then there is so much more. It's a kind of an iceberg thing. And so that, but I don't think that was written in a way that was asking you to have a depth of understanding for that. I don't know. Yeah, the way Tobin said it was so great that, then he's martyred at the end. And I feel like the other characters are like set up to play checkers, and Lester is set up to play chess or something. Like, they're just cardboard cutouts. They're not characters. The other thing I'd forgotten that brings us back to women in this movie is how it starts with the Thor Birch character on screen suggesting that they kill her dad because he's so, what does she say? Because he's a loser or what have you. And so, like, that kind of indictment from the beginning then also I don't know. Yeah, this movie is not interested in the lives of the women that it follows. And certainly, again, Mina Savari's character is, I think we are meant to laugh at her vapidity. And yet, you know, what I see is someone who's already been taken advantage of. Like, and again, I'm not talking about the actress. I'm talking about the character as she describes, you know, having sex with a photographer in a super flippant, this is the way the world works way. So I was disappointed consistently, and through that, outstanding performances
Yeah.
of garbage.
It's interesting. So, like, listening to what both of you just said, one of the things that, as I was sort of reevaluating this again, right, is that I kind of, Tobin, I kind of disagree that you necessarily have to reorient this movie to make it good or make it work. I think you can do this movie the way it is, but there's things that are just missing, and it has to do with the way that it's all put together in the writing and so on and so forth, that I think are sort of the death knell that just kill it. And I think there is a point that can be made through the objectification of women and the idea of like the shrill housewife. And you can present those things as long as you are making it clear that, you know, the protagonist is also the villain, right? And I think the problem with Kevin Spacey is that one of the reasons he's so good in this movie, and also I think dooms it from ever being able to do that, is because he basically is Lester. And one of the things that makes that performance an Oscar performance is that he is very much the monster that he's playing. And he's playing Lester as a hero. And I just don't think, I don't know if that's in the writing or I don't know if that's in the performance, right? But what makes the performance compelling is also what dooms the rest of the movie and makes it unable to be clear that it's talking about the objectification of women, about the way that we have these absurd standards of beauty in this country or whatever it's going on about, right? I think it's sort of this very strange kind of double-edged sword of Spacey that ultimately is what makes this movie irredeemable, even if there are elements of it that I think are that do kind of survive past that fact.
Yeah, it gestures at those issues, but it's not interested in them.
Right,
You know,
that's true.
it's window dressing, and you're totally right. I think that the part of what's the power and the downfall of that performance is that it seems now looking at it with these eyes very close to Kevin Spacey himself. I mean, the when he's getting fired from the job and he threatens a sexual harassment claim against the guy. I mean, it's these things play very differently now. Maybe they shouldn't have. Maybe they always should have played that way. But I think that the movie, it's in the language of the movie that makes him a hero too. I mean, the slow motion, the way the music plays as the petals fall, as the she opens her dance jersey and the petals come. I mean, it's played a little for laughs and like, but he is portrayed in slow, push in on his face to a close up. These things are hero shots. These things are coded in cinema as he's not portrayed in this. I would argue he's not portrayed in this movie as a monster. And I think that you're right. You could redo the movie with the sort of story it has. I'm not saying you have to make her the protagonist. I'm just saying I would rather watch that movie than this one.
Well, I think if someone other than Spacey is the protagonist here, his character becomes like, I think the movie becomes like a comedy almost, because like he's so insane that by focusing on him, it grounds it in a weird way. But like if you're looking at it from the outside, it's like this guy quits his job. He starts smoking weed all the time. Like it's a weird shift in like I'm not trying to defend this movie, but I think by changing the focus, it becomes a totally different thing in a way that like makes it less arty. I don't know.
It played, a lot of those things played as comedy at the time. I mean,
Right.
him smoking outside. I mean, I remember us laughing in the theater. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot in this movie that played as black comedy satire at the time that has just curdled for me.
Yeah, I agree. I remember. I think a lot of those lines that I remembered are kind of the quippy ones. I mean, so I am a person that typically does not try to divorce the artist from the art. You know, like if yes, does it bother me that I had to pay to rent it? Yes, it does, because I do not want to provide any more money to some of these folks. But if I'm looking at it with my 2022 glasses on and just blurred out Kevin Spacey so that I can't see who he is, to me, they have the same problems. Right? These two characters are both dissatisfied. They both feel like, you know, we've already said, I did everything right. This is the recipe to be happy. This is what you're supposed to do. And yet I am not satisfied. I'm not fulfilled. And Lester has the luxury of just saying, fuck it.
Mm-hmm,
and I can't remember Annette Bening's character, Carolyn, does not have that luxury. Like, and she's played it it's played in this sarcastic, you know, shrill way of like, do you want to be in charge of everything? Oh, absolutely. I'll just be in charge of everything. But like, I mean, that's, to me, they have the same inner turmoil, but one of them is allowed to just stop and do whatever the fuck, including fantasizing and being inappropriate with his daughter's friend, not only an underaged human, but also like that is super, super predatory behavior.
Yeah.
So regardless of the actual human involved, the character, like, they have the same issue. So I again agree with Tobin that the interesting movie is to watch Carolyn figure out how to be happy, and what are those things that she's juggling that she wants to keep juggling, and what does she want to chuck across the room. And Lester is one of the things I would chuck across the room.
Yeah, I think we all agree with Tobin, basically. There's a couple things, like, there's still something about this movie that for some reason, like, lures me in, even though I absolutely think that all of these criticisms are entirely right. And, like, I do think it's incredibly problematic and not great, right? But also, like, I do think it's worth seeing, again, as sort of a anthropological sort of artifact. The one thing, like, I will just kind of give a little bit, I'll give it an inch, is that even the first time I saw it, right, I did not like Lester, and I did not think of him as a hero. And I do think that the movie at least tries to point out that it's framing this in his viewpoint. And so he is kind of making himself the hero. Like, it starts out with, like, his monologue, it's his story. And of course that's all, again, like, it's white men being very proud of themselves and, like, fuck that, whatever. But it's not
the entitlement.
Yeah.
Oh God, that whole opening monologue.
Yeah. Right.
Thing. I was just throwing up in my mouth.
Yeah.
The world was supposed to land at his feet because he's a mediocre white dude. And I'm just over it. Sorry to interrupt.
No. At the very least, like, Ball doesn't have a neutral observer. Like, it's not observed through the audience, it's observed through him. And so I think it gets a little bit of leeway as far as that goes, because he's kind of like, it's like him casting himself as the hero, and I think we're, as the audience, supposed to kind of not agree with that entirely. Again, I think it's because it's bad writing that fails, or that we sort of lose sight of that very quickly as the movie progresses. I do think, though, that's like what it's trying to do, and that's what it wants to do. It doesn't necessarily want you to objectively think of him as the hero, but to understand that he is casting himself in that role, and he is telling you the story, and how you feel about him can kind of be your own conclusion. But like, again, I'm giving it way too much credit. I completely like,
Yeah.
I'll concede that point, but I do think it tries to like make that right framing.
I disagree. I think of, in particular, the scene where Carolyn is out in the morning before going to work, before getting her daughter out of high school. You know, her list starts early, blah, blah, blah. She's out with her roses, and she smells pot smoke. And so she opens the garage, and he's, you know, sarcastic about the order of the muscles he's working or whatever. And she's like, you know, you can't do that. And he's, you know, his answer is, that's what you think, or whatever. I felt like that moment is billed as like a fuck yeah, go Lester, you know? Or when he's so happy working in the drive-thru. Like, I do think it sets him up as he is having this, like, obviously midlife crisis, but like, you know, kind of midlife coming of age.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my viewing of this movie, he was supposed to be the hero.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I were to guess and you were to ask Alan Ball, I'll speak for Alan Ball here, right? My guess would be that he would say, oh no, I don't think Lester's the hero. Lester thinks he's the hero. And that's how the movie works. That would be my guess, right? As to like what the perception. I don't necessarily think he succeeds at that, because I think you're right. There are too many times where it's like, you know, high-fiving to the audience, being like, fuck yeah, right? Shrill ladies, you know.
Yeah, I see your point, but to me, it comes back to, you know, other things of the late 90s, early aughts, but like the arguments around South Park or something, where it's like, if you are, if you are the, you know, analytic audience that understands when they say fuck Canada, they don't actually mean it. They're being hyperbolic, blah, blah. But a lot of people are just going to watch it and say, yeah, fuck Canada, you know? So giving it those extra layers, to me, doesn't change what most people are going to walk away with. And that is quite troubling.
Yeah, and I think that like the reason why I was so quickly turned off by it is in part because Sam Mendes has this whole like scarf wearing auteur, like, aren't I very good at art, you know, kind of vibe, and I'm like, oh dude, no, fuck this and fuck this movie.
Well, do you say that because of this movie or because of other things that he's done?
No, it was this movie, and then I was like, I tried to like Road to Perdition, and again, Thomas Newman, fantastic work. Conrad Hall, score, fantastic work. Everything else, fucking garbage, except for Paul
I don't
Newman.
like that movie though, because the same thing, like when we did Hanks for the Memories, I was like, I want Tom Hanks to be a bad guy, and I'm like, oh wait, I don't actually want this. Like, this is not what I want at all. But like 1917 is great. Like, I think that you're underselling him. I think that you should not criticize an entire filmography based on one shitty movie.
2 shitty movies, and Skyfall, which is the 3rd shitty movie.
And Away We Go is not great, you know. I mean, he has more misses than hits for me. Although I've seen some of his stage work, and it is pretty spectacular. That feels like maybe where his heart is. You know, one of the things that struck me watching this movie this time is in the suburban ennui genre that was big through this era. I think of like Little Children, which I think is a superior movie to this.
Yeah, agreed.
But the one that really, that I think does, maybe just I wanted this to be that, was The Ice Storm from a couple of years before.
Yes. Tobin, you love The Ice Storm.
I do love it so much. And it invests so beautifully in so many perspectives. And I feel like that is one that I loved when I saw it and have never stopped loving and have watched many times since.
Yeah.
And I had I watched American Beauty. I wrote this like, you know, glowing 5-star review the same year that I gave The Matrix 3.5 stars. You know, I give it this 5-star review, and then I watch it maybe once or twice and then 20 years later I watch it again for this. Like, it is not it is a thing that if it didn't curdle for me by Oscars, had curdled soon afterwards. And the Ice Storm is a movie that does all of the things that I think this movie wanted to do, but with a lot more integrity and grace and, investment in its characters.
Well, I think the answer is no, but in terms of the rewatching thing here, is there depth? Is there perceived depth? The people are like, "Oh my god, there's so much to glean from this movie," or was it just like, "That was really good, I never need to see that again?" Like, what was the perspective at the time? Was that just like a, "I need to see this again to see, like, what's actually going on here?" Like, John, when you talked about going to see The Sixth Sense again, I know it's a totally different thing. You're like, "I wanna figure out how he did that magic trick," right?
Yeah.
But, like, was this a movie that people are like, "Oh my god, there's so much, nuance here, there's so much subtlety to pick at," or was it just like, "It's great." Like, what did the people who love this movie love about it?
I think they love the fucking plastic bag.
Yeah, I think people we those of us who gave it 5-star reviews,
yeah,
felt like it was really saying something about that 1999 America, and I don't know what we thought it was saying necessarily, except following Wes Bentley's philosophical journey of like, fuck this shit, I'm out of here. There's a so yeah, I don't know that people were going back to it again because they needed to decipher anything, as much as what it probably was doing was reinforcing some things that a lot of Academy voters felt very comfortable with, in 1999. But yeah, I don't know. It spoke to something in college sophomore me that I am a little ashamed of now.
John, was this movie financially successful?
Yeah, it was, and I don't think I don't know a ton of people who went to go see it more than once. But everybody I knew went to go see it, and everybody I knew was talking about it and loved it. I do think there's a couple things to like. We can't rewrite history, but like, I think this movie still looks very different if 9/11 never happens. And I think 9/11, obviously reset a lot of people's priorities and feelings about ennui and life and that sort of thing. So like, to call this the ultimate pre 9/11 movie, which a lot of people have, I think that, again, you can't like un 9/11 it. It's so there. But I also do think that like there's something about the movie that when it came out as well, that in terms of big major release prestige movies, this movie is very, very different, especially for the time. And it did kind of, again, criticize it all you want, and I'm fully on board with those criticisms, everything that we've said here today. But I will also say that like there was nothing else really like it at the time in terms of those like Oscar bait big movies that a lot of people went to go see and had sort of mass market appeal. That's sort of, I think, what made it unique and entrancing and weird, and at least let its kind of mystique linger for longer than maybe it should have.
One of this is unverified sources online, but they list the budget at $15 million, which is pretty small, and that its domestic box office was $356 million.
So the answer to financially successful is yes, very much so.
Very much
bigly,
so. Yeah.
Well, like, I feel like that they still make this kind of like Oscar baity movie now, but it feels like the kind of movie that like I would begrudgingly see in February. Where I'm like, all right, I saw the other 9. I gotta see this one. Like, because it's the kind of thing. I haven't seen the trailer.
Yeah,
but it feels like it's like I know what this is.
Well, and as Aislinn said, like I think as Aislinn was saying early on, that this becomes what Oscar bait is. Like there's an Oscar bait template that this movie kind of sets.
There's a tropey element.
I mean, they'd use the score in all kinds of trailers after this for movies that they were trying to get to like be the next American Beauty. And like with anything else, anytime you're trying to be the next anything, it's like, oh well, I've seen that one already.
Yeah.
Looking at the list of other Best Picture nominees, the 2 reviews I wish I could swap in my college newspaper days. I wrote a review of The Insider, the Michael Mann movie, The Insider, which I gave maybe, I can't remember if it was 1.5 or 2 stars. And
Tobin.
I know, and I in my end of the year Oscar thing, I suggested that Michael Mann should be drummed out of the guild for making a movie as boring as The Insider. Now, The Insider is one of my all-time favorite movies. I teach it every semester at school, and so I would flop those two.
Do we do The
reviews.
Insider? Did you teach it to us or no?
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember the over the ear shot, the Russell Crowe walking into the salesman's
No,
Michael
I
Chambon's
don't
office?
think so.
Yeah, it was for sure. I taught it. Yeah, but it's that's that's what I would vote for now for Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I given the nominees. And I feel like that those are the two that I would beg the audience to let me swap retroactively in my college days.
Aislinn, what happened with you? You liked it the first time, and there was a whole cake thing. When did you realize? I got to get out of this relationship.
What happened with me is a much longer story. Like I said, I think at the time, it hit, me in adolescence, and when you realize that, these people around you, including your parents, your grandparents, whoever else, are just humans, that's a tough day, or that has been a tough day for me historically. And so I think this was a movie that, if you kind of take a few steps back, like, well, why would a young teen be interested in this movie? I think it was that, the ennui is universal, and this idea that our parents have this whole other set of things going on, was really tragic to me. And I thought more people should pay attention to. It worked on me. Yes, Lester is entitled to his happiness, at the time. And so I think what happened was I grew up a little further, and I mean, in no small part, again, that it is not interested in the women in this movie. And I am interested in all the women in this movie.
Yeah.
There are really interesting stories there, potentially. More interesting than Lester's not satisfied with his job. Lester's not satisfied with his relationships. And because those things things stopped being handed to him, is why he's unhappy, you know? Anyway, and like we've talked about the, Oscar bait tropiness, when those things started to be a joke, then I'm like, oh, I see now that, this is brimming with cliches, and invented some cliches perhaps, or became the new face of some of those cliches, that I am categorically done with, mediocre white man stories. I've heard so many. They're everywhere. I'm interested in different stories. And so I think that's where I am now, is no, I don't need this story. I know what that is. I'm interested in someone else's story, and someone else telling the story.
I want to complain about one more thing. It's a scene we'd already talked about, but one of my least favorite things in movies, and I don't know if I've talked about it on this podcast or not, but I hate when a movie starts in the middle and then works back to that moment.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And this movie does that. And also, what even more sucks about this is that the whole thing is just like, oh, this girl wants to kill her dad. I don't know who this is, but that's super cool.
Yeah.
And then the next scene is Kevin Spacey being like, so I'm about to die in this movie. It's like, we just said that. Like, we don't need this twice. Like, it does the same thing in both these scenes from different perspectives, and it's annoying. And I hate that in every movie. I hate it especially here as well. And just stop doing that.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize Aislinn's point that I think that's another thing that I was very early kind of seduced by, is the oh shit, grown-ups aren't really grown-ups, right? Being
Right.
20 when this movie came out and being like, oh fuck, that's not great. And then, Thomas Newman in the cinematography, and I'm like, oh, what a great movie that was. And then, of course, like the shocking ending, which, of course, I think emphasized, it's kind of cheap, but it emphasizes a lot of those kind of emotions. But yeah, and Tobin, you make a great point as well. The Ice Storm and Little Children do that so much better. And it's the same idea, right, of like, adults don't know what the fuck they're doing. Right. That's great. Right. It can make for great drama. It can be really, really painful and has to be done right. But those two movies do it pretty well, and this doesn't.
I think the other thing that made Joey, back to your point about why, like, the reaction to this movie at the time, the part of it, the allure of the movie at the time, for those of us who were into movies, was the Kevin Spacey of it all. I mean, 4 years after Usual Suspects and Seven, and LA Confidential in between, like, this was, and here he was the lead of the movie. And so, as talk about problematic movies, going back to The Usual Suspects, given how what we know about a lot of people involved in making that movie. That was a cresting wave of Kevin Spacey too, that I think brought people to this movie, sort of, at least sort of the cinephile set, right? Like our parents knew who Kevin Spacey was by the time this movie came out, in a way that they didn't 4 years before.
This is easily, I'm keeping a list of the movies we covered from this year on Letterboxd, and this is easily last place. So shout out to The Phantom Menace, no longer my least favorite movie from 1999.
Oh wow,
we have a new contender.
Wow,
which is funny because of the acclaim that this got, right? Like, it's just the Best Picture nominee, the Best Picture winner, 5-time or 6-time, whatever, Academy Award winner.
We will cover better ones and we'll cover worse ones. So,
oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, but yeah, we had to put this one in the top 9 because of all the things that we've said, and the phenomenon that it was when it came out, and the Oscar deluge that it got, and then all the stuff that's happened since then. So
the 5-star review in the Willamette Collegian,
that legendary.
So every episode we ask, it's like a 2-part question. It's either a 2 questions or 2-part question. But first question for both of you: do you have, and you can look it up if you need to, a favorite movie from 1999?
Tobin's is The Insider.
Well, that's of the nominees.
Well, there's the 2 Tom Cruise movies, at least one of which you covered with us on Cruise Club.
Okay, my favorite movie of 1999, if I could change day to day, because there's so many that I love, but I think I would say The Talented Mr. Ripley is probably my favorite.
Really? Okay. Okay. Yeah. I just saw that for the first time last year after I read The Secret History, and my friend was like, it's kind of like that, sort of. And I was like, all right, it is. It's not. So,
Tobin, good choice. That's one of my favorite movies of all time, period. So, I'm
wow. Okay.
Yep.
Aislinn, do you have a favorite from 1999?
So at the time, and for a long time after, that would be Cruel Intentions.
Yeah.
No question. And it doesn't get that much better to say now, but 10 Things I Hate About You is one that I continue to go back to, and I have a lot of fondness for the campus that it was a high school in Tacoma that it was filmed at. And I have fondness for the setting, as well as
are you connected to that high school? Because I knew a bunch of people who went to that high school who were extras in the movie.
Yeah, I did. I knew some too. Yeah, because I went to college in Tacoma, and so I also had Stadium High friends. But in any case, yeah, I think 10 Things I think holds up. I say that having not watched it very recently. So,
well, you have to convince your podcasting co-host Brian Rodriguez to finally cover it. Like, he has not done that for his show yet. 300 something episodes deep, because he's so deep. he's so in love with Julia Stiles. I think he's afraid to do it dirty. So you got to just go on there and do it with him.
Funny.
Oh, it holds up. It holds up.
And also an Allison Janney.
Yeah.
An early Allison Janney favorite.
Superior Allison Janney film of the 99 Canada.
Engorged.
I love that movie. I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
I've never seen it.
It's one of the handful of movies. I know. Yeah. It's one of the handful of movies that once we started telling people about this podcast and looking for guests, we got so many people who wanted to do this movie.
Oh, I'm sure you could do like a whole retrospective.
One of them had dibs, who sort of asked first and who I couldn't really say no to. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be quite the love-in for that movie for sure. But that movie, it's so interesting how
I hope I like it.
I really think you will, and
you will. I think you'll like it.
It's a lot to say about it, but I'm good choice as well.
Now the follow-up question, which is immeasurably harder, and you can also opt out because the more important question is the one you already answered. Do you have a favorite movie of all time?
The Insider.
So it's not from 1999, but it is from all time.
I haven't thought about this question in several years. So the most recent answer I can remember giving was Children of Men.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Wow.
Good one.
Okay.
Good one.
That's a good one.
My real honest answer sounds totally snooty, but I'm gonna say it anyway. My favorite movie of all time is Fanny and Alexander, the Ingmar Bergman movie from 1982. Family saga in the early 1900s in Sweden. It's beautiful and funny and sad, and it's a magical movie.
Tobin, there was a list that I had gotten from you in college that you were passing out to anybody who wanted it. And I don't know if those are your favorite movies or just movies that you were supposed to see. It was like 11 movies or something, and like the TV series Rome. Was that your favorite movies, or is that just like great films to see?
I think I'd made that list for, people were asking for, what should we watch that we didn't get a chance to see in any of the classes, and a quick dash off list. Yeah.
Okay.
I have to go back. In other circumstances, I also often say The Contender. Because very few people have, not very few, but like often there is someone in the group I'm talking to that has not seen or hasn't heard of it. And like, I like proselytize that movie everywhere I go. Here, I don't need to. Because y'all are aware, but that is the other answer that is my go-to.
Yeah, I could easily have said the 5-star review from 1999 that I stand by is my January 22nd, 1999 5-star review of Shakespeare in Love, which is another movie that one of my favorites.
Do you really like that movie?
I watch it regularly.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get it. You'll have to explain why.
I can send you the review.
I don't trust your reviews anymore, Tobin.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Yeah.
Look, Shakespeare in Love is a fine, well-crafted comedy in which Ben Affleck is perfectly cast.
Yeah, exactly. What more could you want?
It's
delightful. It's delightful.
The fucking Thin Red Line came out in
The Thin Red Line is my favorite movie of that year.
Yeah.
That's far and away my favorite movie that year.
Okay.
I do really enjoy Shakespeare in Love.
Okay, that's fair.
But Thin Red Line was Aislinn could tell you, I listened to the soundtrack all the time. I had the poster from the movie theater. It was like, I was the only one who went to it more than once at the movie theater in Salem, Oregon. So yeah, I'm a big Thin Red Line fan. We can agree on that.
Of course. All right, we're way off topic now and running over time. But thanks for stopping by, guys.
Yeah, no, thanks.
This has been fun.
If you've never seen American Beauty, don't watch it or
No, probably don't. Probably don't.